Hello and welcome to the Functional Forum. Unlike normal where we bring the speakers to New York, this time we've come to the IFM's annual conference in Austin, Texas to check out some of the best speakers and show the future of functional medicine. I've got my pass, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Functional Forum. If you've never watched the forum before, I just wanted to share with you a little bit about the format. Our goal is to bring functional medicine to the masses through our YouTube channel and through our show. Typically in the Functional Forum, it's a 90-minute show, and we look at clinical functional medicine, we look at practice development and health technology. This will be similar in terms of those themes, but we will also be hearing here at the IFM conference from functional medicine practitioners across the world giving you their best one-minute tips. So it'll be very much like you've seen before, but hopefully some new faces and some favorite faces. Enjoy.
I'm Stephanie Daniel from Functional Medicine SF, and my one tip that I could give anybody who's interested in being in functional medicine or starting in functional medicine or already is to have the courage to just go for it. You don't have to know everything right away. The little bit even that you might be starting with, it will be a wealth of information for the patients who desperately need your guidance and your help. So that would be my biggest encouragement, is to just go for it.
I'm with Dr. Patrick Henaway, the Chief Medical Education Officer for IFM. Doc, what is the theme behind this year's conference?
So it's the Omics Revolution, James. So the Omics Revolution, nature and nurture, looking at the interrelationship of our own genes, the genes of the microbiome within us, as well as the expression of how that happens in our body as our environment bathes our genes. So it's looking at the interaction of all of those things, the omics, all the different omics that are available.
And what would you say are going to be some of the highlights that you're looking forward to this weekend?
Well, the highlights are first focusing on getting an understanding of the genes and the Human Genome Project and the Human Microbiome Project, and then moving into really how do we work with this in clinical practice? How do we look at the genome? How do we look at the metabolome? How do we look at the microbiome? How they work together? And we're going to have really hands-on practical skills for our clinicians. And then we're going to close on the last day the Pioneer Project done by the Institute for Systems Biology and Dr. Jeremy Nicholson coming over from King's College in London, talking about really the big systems view and how it's transforming medicine, not just in the future, but today.
That's so exciting. Well, we'll be here all weekend. We're bringing you the best speakers from Austin. Thanks so much, Dr. Henaway. We're looking forward to a great show.
Thanks, James.
Here we are with the father of functional medicine, Dr. Jeffrey Bland. Dr.
Thank
Bland,
you so much. Wonderful to be here.
It's so great to be able to share your talk today with thousands of doctors who are going to be watching the Functional Forum episode over the next few years. What an exciting time to be sharing this information. It seems like whether it be President Obama's State of the Union or otherwise, personalized medicine is finally having its time in the sun.
Yeah, you know, this really is one of those seismic times in society where change is occurring so rapidly and information is compressed into small little time zones, and we're just really witnessing health sciences and medical care and healthcare become a personal advocacy issue for all people. And I think this is as Eric Topol said in his book, The Patient Will See You Now. It's really turning the equation around where patients are becoming more activated, more understanding of their health, and practitioners now are stepping up and saying, we've got to deliver a different quality of care, that's using this 21st century medical technology, this extraordinary discovery breakthrough that we're occurring right now, so that we can really help patients to live a century of high-level living with good health.
Absolutely. So can you give the viewers at home a little preview as what you're going to be talking about in your segment today?
Yeah, the revolution that we're undergoing has been often called the Omics revolution, because it has to do not just with understanding our genes, but understanding how our genes are expressed. And when you talk about expression of genes, that people say, what does that mean? What it means is that our genes are really sitting kind of quietly, waiting for information to come from our environment to be turned on or turned off, so that they will express their function in how we look, act, and feel. Yeah. So my talk is really going to be talking about how we evaluate these things in an individual. How do we look at their genes and how they're expressed into their health patterns well before they ever get sick, so we can activate their health genes and silence their disease genes. And that's really the focus of what I'm going to be speaking to.
And we've been interviewing people all weekend about sort of their health tips, and doctors from all across the movement to share. Is there, outside of your talk today, is there one thing that you would like to speak, if you're speaking to doctors all around the world, that you would like them to know or to use in the future of their medicine?
Yeah, I think that the overall kind of model of what I'm trying to get across is knowing the right questions to ask. We have an extraordinary number of answers that are available today, but often docs and even their patients don't know the questions to ask. So this whole approach is, how do we understand how to access the right questions, because the answers will come from asking the right questions. So that's really the theme I believe that we need to be focusing on.
Huge. Last year on the Evolution of Medicine Summit, we spoke a lot about this sort of cross-section of functional medicine and technology. How excited are you to see things like Living Matrix show up that can track outcomes at scale and show that this medicine is doing what it's, what we
Well,
said?
isn't that all the key? The key is, the talk is wonderful, but it's the action that really makes a difference. It's down to the ground implementation. And so these tools that are really making these complex concepts more utilizable, more implementable, more readily accessible are really going to be the agents of change. And so I think that these processes that are making things real are really going to be the transforming principles.
Great. It has been such a pleasure to spend some time here with you, Dr. Bland, and
Thanks
do this. So an introduction, this is, you want to actually introduce to the people at home your talk for today?
Well, the title of my talk is The Marriage of IFM with the Omics Revolution, a marriage made in heaven. And I think hopefully you'll see why I think it is a marriage made in heaven, and what we can do to access this information to really empower good health and to focus away from disease risk into health promotion and disease, kind of putting it in the background. So that's the focus of where we're going.
Sounds like a worthy goal. Dr. Jeff Bland, Austin 2015, you've got to be here next year. This is the Functional Forum, and enjoy.
Thank you. Hey IFMers, those of you who are new, this is your first meeting, I can assure you you're with the most remarkable group of humans that you would ever want to spend 3 days with. This organization, as David Jones and I were just discussing at lunch, if it does no other than one thing, it will put a virus in your central nervous system that you can never escape from. So I would suggest that if you're worried about that infection, you better leave now, because if you don't, you will be forever captured. There is a revolution afoot that we are all participants in. I never thought I would be so fortunate, A, to have my son stand up here and get the crowd control, but B, to be still professionally active at a time where this revolution was at a tipping point. So in 1978, I authored a book called Medical Applications of Clinical Nutrition. Patrick Hanaway was a medical student at the time. He said, Jeff, that was one of the first books that really interested me in this field. And in that book, I proposed that there was going to be this remarkable transition occurring through the development of multi-analyte testing that would allow us to early understand physiological disturbance at such a place that we could intervene early by using less invasive and less toxic interventions to modulate metabolic disturbance and create long-term wellness. That was the theme of the book, 1978. Now, with that as a context, let me ask you a question. How do you know when you are involved in a revolution. Because, you know, we still wake up in the morning, we put our pants on one leg at a time, and gee whiz, you know, how do we know we're really living in a time that epically will be seen by historians to be that of a great transformation? Well, let me then ask you the following, and this might help to bridge the gap into this revolution. So let me ask you, who's the chairman of Apple? Who is the chairman of Apple Computer? Arthur Levinson, right? And who is Arthur Levinson? Arthur Levinson was a biochemist, University of Washington graduate, early 70s, went on to Princeton to get a PhD in biochemistry, did a postdoc at the University of California, San Francisco with Herb Boyer. Most of you know Herb Boyer. He was the founder of the first genetic-based pharmaceutical company, Genentech, of which then Arthur became the CEO eventually. He left then ultimately to be on the Google board. He's now the chairman of the Apple board, and he was recently funded as the CEO of a new company, which is Calico Biosystems, that is collaborating with the Broad Institute, which is a joint collaboration between Harvard and MIT to focus on health and wellness technologies to leverage genomics. And he is a fundamental, and by the way, a major funder of that Calico was Google. He sits on the chairmanship of the board of Apple. These are information technology companies, right? Now let me just ask a couple of other questions. Who is Elizabeth Holmes? Right? You all probably know Elizabeth Holmes, at least her reputation. So Theranos, right? She's the youngest billionaire female in the history of American commerce. The company has got a net worth now of about $8 billion. It's a blood spot development 20-analyte technology company that Walgreens has picked up to distribute direct-to-consumer health from a single spot of blood, complete multi-analyte profiling, right? Now the FDA has wanted to oppose this. They don't want information going direct to consumers about health information, but I can tell you the tsunami is overcoming all of these regulatory agencies. We are witnessing a transformation. So let me give you a third question. Who is Jessica Richmond, right? Another interesting woman of authority in our period of time. So you probably know she is another one of these Stanford illiterati, that she basically graduated in a non-science field directly, but became kind of affiliated, and is now the CEO and co-founder of the company uBiome. And what is uBiome doing? Direct-to-consumer microbiome testing. And it's growing very, very rapidly. It's one of these Fortune, companies that's on a rapid ascension. So who is Anne Wojcicki? Why? We know 23andMe. We know the association it had, at least through her former husband, or her husband, which is that of the Google 23andMe connection. The largest database of human genetic information ever been assembled, right? And now it's being sold out to all sorts of people in an anonymous, patient-anonymous way to start looking at gene markers and in the interrelationship between health and disease patterns. And then there's a fantastic photograph on the internet that you can all download. It's a lunch meeting with President Obama in the middle at Woodside, California, in the Silicon Valley. It has Larry Ellison, Sergey Brin, the CEO of Cisco. It has the CEO of Apple, the CEO of Facebook, and the CEO of Microsoft all sitting at the table. Together, their net worth is $1 trillion. And what is it that this group of individuals are talking about? The development of informatic and genomic-based healthcare discovery and innovation that will drive the new personalization of healthcare, for which then President Obama went to the microphone in the Rose Garden to do the President's address to the State of the Union talking about precision medicine. Now you'll notice that in all of these examples I've just shared with you, there's not a single person that represents hospitals, insurance companies, professional AMA organizations, or any other of the conspiratati that has held in check the development of information. So then you start to say, well, what about Jamie Haywood? There's another, that's James Haywood, a man. So this is an MIT mechanical engineer graduate whose brother gets ALS, and he and his other brother then form a group called Patients Like Me, which has grown up to be one of the largest forces for consumer-based or health consumer-based research, virtual research off the internet. They're accumulating data now that is going to be actually changing the whole nature of how we do clinical research in a virtual patient-oriented fashion. And now, as I go to FDA meetings in discussion about clinical design, the FDA is requiring new clinical trials to get patient input as it relates to outcome variables as it pertains to studies. This is a remarkable transforming period. Larry Schmarr, who you probably know, was with Mark Andreessen forming Netscape, which was the first search engine for the internet. You might recall, those of you back then. So Larry Schmarr, who is an aerospace engineer, worked for NASA, is now at the University of California, San Diego, is traveling all around. You'll see him on all the YouTube downloads, talking about his N of 1 experience in which he's analyzing every possible biometric, genomic, omic metric on himself and looking at how this information can encode not disease but wellness over time. And then lastly on my list, of course, would be Eric Topol. And his most recent book, The Patient Will See You Now, is a manifesto of change, right? It's a manifesto for change. If you haven't read it, it has to be on your required reading list. So with that as an introduction, why is the functional medicine omics a match made in heaven? Well, I'm going to give you a personal experience, and Lori's giving me, and the IFM people are giving me the privilege of kind of talking very personally. So I'm going to share Jeff Bland's walk down this path and some of my own data. So I owe a lot to Lee Hood, and you're going to hear Nathan Price, Dr. Price, who is a leader of the group, the Institute for Systems Biology in Seattle, Washington. Lee is credited as being the pioneer who was principally involved in inventing a number of the instruments that were used in deciphering the human genome. And he has this Pioneer 100 project that I was one of the 100. I think there was like 105 participants. We just finished our year in 2014, and I'm going to share with you what I learned about myself over this year experience. Because I learned omics in a very intimate level, not theoretic, which I had a pretty good understanding of, but very personal. And this comes from a guy who's been measuring his blood chemistries quarterly for the last 20 years. So what more could I have learned? Well, there was a lot I learned. Because this genomics, metabolomics, microbiomics, epigenomics, transcriptomics, proteomics and exposomics all fits together in some very personal way to direct us not just towards disease risk, but towards wellness. And in fact, there's a wonderful quote that appeared recently in New York Times Magazine talking about the genomic revolution. It said, "It is our genomic origami, this double-stranded helix. In every cell, you have the same piece of paper. How you fold the paper determines if the paper becomes either an airplane or a duck. It's the shape that you fold it in that matters. This has to do with the 3D code of biology. And what is it that shapes the DNA so that it will become the origami of health? It is your environment. It is the epigenetic modulators of experience that occurred the moment the sperm met the egg and have been communicating through this intimate relationship with the most precious thing we own, which is our book of life." So where did it start for me? It started with my mother, who was always a very strong advocate. Now, my mother's story here is important, I think, because as you know, we all inherit DNA, both from our father and our mother, but we get a little extra DNA from our mother, don't we, in our mitochondrial DNA. And mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's the energy center of the cell. If you knew my mother, you would say, you know where Jeff Bland comes from. She's a vigilant 90-year-old ombudsman for her senior citizens. And what I've learned over the terms of her life has been very useful, I think, as the lens in which I sieve my own experience. So we've moved from Gregor Mendel, this kind of concept of a deterministic genome, dominant, recessive, can't do anything about it, didn't fill out an application card, just got the luck of the draw, to this Watson and Crick model, which is really a model that more relates to genetic plasticity, which I'm going to be describing, that the genes are fixed, but the way they're expressed, as you learned this morning, are multiple based on the environment. And this goes way back to the dawn of the age of the genetic metabolism diseases of infancy with Sir Archibald Garrod, who was born into the family, whose father was a physician, actually was the royal physician to the King of England. And so they had dinner parties with people like Darwin and others that probably influenced his thinking at the dinner table. But he was the father of the genetic metabolism disease concept. And he said, this is in a Lancet article in 1902, it might be claimed that what used to be spoken of as a diathesis of a disease is nothing else but chemical individuality. It is nearly true to say that factors which confer upon us predisposition and immunity to disease are inherent in our chemical structure and even in the molecular groupings that went into the chromosomes from which we sprang. This is 51 years pre-Watson and Crick. So we have a functional medicine legacy. That's where this marriage between omics and functional medicine starts. It starts with Archibald Garrod. It goes up through Roger Williams and Linus Pauling. This is a photograph that was taken in 1974 at the formation of the American Society of Preventive Medicine meeting that I attended, to Bruce Ames, who, as you know, is one of our Linus Pauling Award winners and certainly a thought leader for our field, in which he was quoted as saying, when I interviewed him on Functional Medicine Update, he was 84 years of age at the time, he said, "My enthusiasm genes are undamaged, but I won't vouch for my neurons." You know, so certain things age and others stay constant. So the Human Genome Project was going to be the revolution from which all the pharmaceutical companies would know about the new drugs they were going to be developing, because we'd find all these genes that were tied to specific diseases. And yet the hype was a little overblown. In fact, it led to disillusionment, because we recognized, yes, the code was cracked, but actually the interconnection and the penetrance into the phenotype of that genetic information was not so clear. And in fact, when we do GWAS studies, the genome-wide area association studies, we find that although you get statistical significances of like 10 to the minus 13th between a gene and a disease, that in the terms of an individual patient having that disease with that gene, it's a very low penetrance of frequency. So statistically, it sounds interesting. In terms of clinical application, it's very still esoteric. So why did it lead to disillusionment? It led to disillusionment because single nucleotide polymorphisms are not the whole story. You have these insertions, deletions, copy number variants, mosaicism. The exome represents, as we learned already earlier today, only about 1.5% to 2% of the whole genome. We used to call that other stuff junk DNA, but it's probably not so junky. There's a lot of information there that controls the executive centers of how genes are expressed. And we recognize that cell specificity differs in the way genes are expressed in over 200 different cell types. We know epigenetics then modulates how genes are expressed by methylation, the stop codons on the front end of the gene sequence. We know acetylation alters then the way the genes, the histones open up the genome so that can be read. We know phosphorylation, which is another epigenetic process, modulates kinase signaling systems. We know these small inhibitory RNAs are now starting to be recognized as having a huge role to play in modulating the expression of genes. And then we know oxidation, glycation, and amino acid conjugation also play roles in post-translational modification of proteins and changing our phenotype. Every one of those factors I just mentioned are modifiable based on the environment that the person lives in, how they live, act, think, feel, drink, breathe, and move. So epigenetics is certainly a major part of this emerging story, and if you've read the most recent studies on epigenetics, you recognize that the more we look at the topic, the more we recognize this is a very big wild card in how our genes ultimately give rise to health or disease. Randy Journal, another Linus Pauling Award winner from functional medicine, was, I think, the father of nutritional epigenomics. Musha Sev, who will be speaking at a meeting that we're sponsoring in October at McGill, is another person who has a tremendous background in behavioral epigenetics, how our attitudes, thoughts, and the environment, and stress, and feeling at risk, and feeling being under violence can influence the genetic messages and how they are being expressed. So what we've learned is genes plus environment equals phenotype. And this omics systems biology approach is not just one layer, it's a series of layers that are laid on top of one another as a hologram. And we then, as a clinician, look into the hologram and try to make sense of these different layers that layer on top of one another to give rise to the expression of the phenotype of the individual. So Michael Snyder at Stanford has been highly popularized and studied. He is the first guy to really have his full kind of omics personality tied to his phenomics. And it turned out that as he was having all these studies done as the head of the genetics department at Stanford, he got a viral infection, in fact 2 during the year in which the study was done, and he developed diabetes in the phase of the second infection. And all of that was marked by his genomic and phenomic and omic profiling to actually look at what these patterns were that give rise to a system effect, not a single entity, but a system that shifts in the tide of experience. And then we ask the question, is all of this about disease risk? And here's where I want to take a moment to really give a high degree of affirmation to functional medicine. Because functional medicine is not just a drive to reduce the risk of disease, it's a drive to improve the presence of the function we call wellness. That's a very different game, right, than just reducing the series of risk. All of what we've heard today is about disease risk, genes that tie to risk. But yet there are the genes that tie to resilience. In fact, for most of us, the genes that tie to resilience dominate the disease-related risk genes. They silence the disease risk genes. And Eric Schott and Stephen Friend, in their Resilience Project, are really studying now what characteristics lead to people who have disease risk genes that are highly penetrant that never get expressed into the phenotype because their resilience genes swamp them out. And how do you then optimize the function of your resilience genes? It's a whole different theme than just looking for disease risks. So the 3 reasons why genomics hasn't been widely adopted are chronic diseases are complex and polygenic, with only about 10% explained by common genetic variants. Not sure if the genetic information leads to actionable outcomes, because if that information doesn't help a person to do something, it's just a bad news bear. You really don't want to know it. And lastly, genomic susceptibility data is presently population-based and difficult to apply to the individual. We need an N-of-1 systems approach. Ba-bam! There is the marriage of functional medicine to omics. It is the system architecture that allows a clinician to understand how to apply this information in a systems biology approach to the individual patient. That is what is needed, is a system of connection, a implementable, actionable system.
We know that there's very well established, we've gone from associations to actually causality information on how someone who may have an overgrowth of a specific bacteria in the gut, that it may cause a molecular mimicry crossover to a host tissue. So a protein expressed on a bacteria overgrowing in the gut may look structurally enough like a protein on one of your tissues, such as a TSH receptor. So your Yersinia overgrows in the gut, the body tries to fight that infection, it gets confused between the protein target on your Yersinia that looks a lot like TSH, and it starts attacking your thyroid. And there's associations like that with rheumatoid arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis, with Citrobacter, Klebsiella, Proteus. So a lot of these associations have been around for a while, but we're finally beginning to see actual data that the bacteria comes first and can cause the molecular mimicry, which can fuel the autoimmune disease. So actual causal data, which is really, really intriguing information that allows us another way to even get ahead of the disease. So if we can find ways to be very proactive and not wait until someone's expressing with a clinical autoimmune disease, and at that point, sometimes the options are fairly limited. And you know, with biologics and strong immune suppressors, if we can find out maybe years before that there's a groundwork being laid for an autoimmune phenomena and take that out of the picture, then perhaps they never progress to that. So with predictive autoantibody testing, with ways that we can look at dietary proteins and how they dance with the immune system, how the GI microbiome might be dancing with the immune system, how chronic stealth viruses and other pathogens might, and put into place ways to remove that offending antigen in genetically susceptible people and to basically calm down their immune system, calm down their inflammatory responses. We might be able to make incredible headroads into this autoimmune epidemic in particular.
Hey folks, it's Mike Muscle here with HighIntensityHealth.com and the author of Belly Fat Effect. My first tip that I wanted to share with you is the role of endotoxin. And so we have 5 grams of this gram-negative bacteria in our GI tract. And different high-fat foods, processed foods, can actually lead to the translocation or the intestinal absorption of this pro-inflammatory bacterial particulate that leads to inflammation. And we know that inflammation is bad because that obviously increases the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, but it's problematic in the context of losing weight because when you're inflamed, you're insulin resistant. And if you're insulin resistant, you can't burn fat. So that's a huge tip with when you have high-fat foods or if you are exposed to highly processed foods, ensure that you have phytonutrients along for the ride because that will help to offset or mitigate that endotoxin-induced inflammation.
The thing that I always like to advise folks to consider is that the structure of that relationship dictates the behavior inside of it. And so in a fee-for-service model, you have certain behaviors that are motivated both on the part of the patient and the practitioner. And in functional medicine, we have to innovate and push beyond the conventional insurance-based fee-for-service relationship structure and look at new models. Many practitioners have looked at cash for service, selling time. And what I'd like to encourage folks to explore is the concept of a membership model or a subscription where people are subscribing to your services and in doing so, maintain the relationship on an evergreen basis and move money to sort of the backdrop of the relationship and allow both the patient and the practitioner to focus on creating and restoring and cultivating health over the long term.
Hello, if you're a fan of the Functional Forum, you know that it's equally important for us for doctors to do great medicine, but also to build strong, sustainable practice models. And so we are in Texas the week before IFM. I'm here in San Antonio for Freedom Practice Coaching's Quarterly and catching up with some of the doctors who we recommended to FPC to see how they're getting on. I think what you're going to see is that this is an amazing model and integrative and functional doctors are using this to be able to build strong, sustainable practices. So let's speak to some of those doctors and see how they're getting on. Can you share a little bit about the impact of Freedom Practice Coaching's had on your practice?
Well, you know, we've been doing this for about 8 years now.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, since we are not insurance-based, we're cash-based, we've been modeling along, just barely making ends meet. And I've been with Freedom Practice Coaching for about 9 weeks now.
9 weeks.
And in the 9 weeks, we have increased our income almost 80% in that time frame.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And what about the program has really added to it?
The incredible thing about it is the coaching, and what we have been able to do is allow our staff to act like CEOs. So now our staff, because they're getting bonuses, they are now they've stepped forward and they are acting like if it's their business.
Yeah.
I mean, they care about everything that happens. They are very attentive. They are talking to their patients because they realize that their bonuses depends on how they perform.
I'm here with Dr. Corinne Weaver, who has been with FPC since February. What's been your experience?
Well, I've been in practice for 11 years as a chiropractor and wanted to implement more functional medicine. And so I figured I had a friend that was in it and he was doing really well in the past year, so I thought this would be a good to do in my practice. And so we implemented it in February, and in March was able to increase our office almost double.
Double in the first month?
In the first month,
and
yeah.
How's that going since then?
It keeps going, and there's just so much to learn with Freedom Practice Coaching. It's just an awesome experience since February.
What do you think is the major takeaway or major difference from the way your colleagues are doing it?
Well, the thing is, I've been in practice management groups, probably 3 other ones in the past. It's just the implementing. The implementing and the coaching is real important, the weekly coaching calls. And they're on me all the time, you know, and so that's been a big motivator. I could do it probably by myself, but I need the coaching, so I needed that. And so once they started doing the coaching they pushed me, and then I started to just take off.
One of the things that was a struggle initially for me was that I forgot that who I was still can be utilized in the program of the systems that I was learning from FPC. So I was so strict on, even though I was following the scripts and how to do it, that when I allowed myself and what I've been doing all these years to embrace the systems that FPC was showing me and the guidance and support, especially from Lewis as my coach and Charlie and Matt, then boom, then things started to take off.
All right, hope you enjoyed that interlude. Let's get back to the main man and the main event, Dr. Jeffrey Bland.
So this study that I was fortunate to be involved in at the Institute for Systems Biology, Dr. Hood's P4 medicine approach, predictive, preventive, personalized, and participatory, where you get this intersection between systems biology and systems medicine with consumer-driven healthcare and social networks and digital revolution that we call the big data revolution, all those coinciding and converging, gave rise then to an ability to apply in my life the systems biology approach of functional medicine. And what did I find? What I found was that when we started to assemble this data with the participants in the Pioneer 100 Wellness Project, Pioneer 100 because there were 100 Pioneer first first of principle participants, looked at our life from an examined perspective by measuring a variety of different phenotypic and genotypic and omic types of principles. I think I had, over the course of the year, in the 4 different analyses I had done, probably in excess of 100,000 data points. And so you start to assemble a fairly large data bank that is also time dependent. You're going to hear much more about this from Nathan Price, who was the director of this project, in a subsequent lecture. But we had information taken about our cognitive and neurological function, about our cardiovascular function, about our digestive function, about our respiratory function, lymphatic and immune system, insulin sensitivity, and our DNA analyzed through omics analysis. And the objective here in this Pioneer 100 was to develop a pilot project bit of information that would then be a proof of principle that this could become ultimately the start of the Framingham Project for the 21st century, not to look at disease risk, but look at wellness promotion. What are the characteristics that constitute a well population? Not a population at disease risk. We're all skirting around the edges of the darkness of fear that we might have a disease come in the dark of night, but rather the positive attribution of health and wellness as something that we, by knowing ourselves at a different level, can both aspire to and achieve because we're doing the right things to be compatible with our genes. That's a whole different mentality than, oh, I hope my number for an ApoE4 doesn't get pulled for Alzheimer's or heart disease. Even ApoE4 is not a deterministically hardwired characteristic to either of those diseases. Now we recognize that this is a characteristic, if you have the double E4, that makes these people very sensitive to toll-like receptor activation through saturated fat consumption and oxidative stress and inflammatory mediators. So if they modulate their diet and lifestyle significantly, the expression of ApoE4 into that inflammatory state is significantly reduced. So even that, what we consider the death gene, is really modifiable by the appropriate intervention. So with that in mind, then, we undertook the Pioneer 100 participation. As I said, each one of us were committed to following the program. We could be on our own plan. It was an N of 1 study. So each of us would take our information and we would act on it as we would then feel fit, both for our own need and our own level of compliance. So we were wearing biometric devices, blood pressures going to the cloud, body mass and body mass index and body composition going to the cloud, everyday fitness measurements going to the cloud, right? So we would know sleep patterns you get from your Fitbit. And all of that then could be encoded, and we could look at trends and correlate it with what was going on in our lives. So it was like an aha experience. Now people say, should I do gene testing? I mean, it seems a little early. Well, let me tell you, once you do gene testing, it opens your mind to a whole level of discovery of your relationship to yourself, because now you've intimately introduced yourself to your physiology. Now, let me say something about this. Before the cholesterol fingerstick test was developed by Boehringer Ingelheim, which was in the 70s and early 80s, very few people, less than 20% of the population, knew their blood cholesterol levels. And therefore, and I'm going to be a little sexist here because I think this is the way it actually went, a wife might be reading a woman's magazine about a heart disease and cholesterol. She would talk to her husband saying, do you know your cholesterol level? Because I just read this article saying high cholesterol is associated with heart disease. And he would say, I don't have a cholesterol problem. That's somebody else's problem. Because he'd never had his cholesterol measured, right? So out of sight, out of mind. Don't ask the question, don't get the answer. Then suddenly Boehringer Ingelheim brings out this fingerstick cholesterol test. Now where do you find it? Shopping malls, health fairs, everybody, and the wife now says, hey honey, over there you can get a free cholesterol check. Oh geez, okay, so you go over, put your finger down. Now it becomes your number of 270, right? Now no longer can it be somebody else's problem, now it's your problem. And what happened? Through that, coincidentally, was born a new class of drugs called statins at the same time. So once you ask the question, the answer starts to resolve, and suddenly cardiology becomes preventive medicine, right? It transformed cardiology. The biggest selling drug in all of the pharmacopoeia for that period of time was a drug that didn't treat any disease. They're called statins. It was Lipitor. It didn't treat a disease. There's not a single diagnosis for high cholesterol. It's a marker for a disease risk, right? It changed the whole pattern of thinking of our society. That's what's happening when you wear these things. That's what's happening when you have your genes tested. It introduces you in an intimate way to the opportunity to engage in wellness in a way that you never have in the absence of that information. So what I learned from my genome analysis, there's a lot more, but I'm giving kind of the top line. I found I had vitamin D receptor polymorphisms with low binding. So, that might be interesting relative to the amount of vitamin D I require to get my level of 25-hydroxy up into a meaningful therapeutic level. I found I had a methylene tetrahydrofolate C677T slow folate metabolism polymorphism, Genomics. I found I had a catechol O-methyltransferase slow methylation. Now they're starting to stack up, right? I have a MTHFR and I have a COMT. And I have a GST type 1 null meaning I don't have that glutathione S-transferase form to help me detoxify stuff that might require methylation, which I already have a bad methylation opportunity to begin with. Now it starts to kind of tell a story, doesn't it? It tells a story. Then I found I had a COL1A1 polymorphism related to bone loss and collagen defects. I had a combination of FTO, APOA2, ADRB2, LPL, lipoprotein lipase, CTP, and ApoC3 saturated fatty acid sensitivity. All of these genes suggest my diet would not be best if it had a lot of palmitic and stearic acid in it, because it would drive more oxidative stress and inflammation. I had a couple of interesting drug pharmacogenomic uniquenesses. I had a polymorphism of VKORC1, which is a risk to taking warfarin. This is related to CYP2C9, and an IFNL3 polymorphism that's a risk to taking PEG interferon. So I'd want to be very cautious if I ever was in a situation where I was forced to take that as a medication. So it tells you a little bit about how you respond to medications. Then here is where the story gets very interesting, I believe. Some of the phenotypic serological biomarker data that ties into this. And I was fortunate, just like Michael Schneider, who had the flu during the course of his experience with his N of 1 analysis, I had, I guess, the fortune of a misfortune, because my dearly beloved mother, that I've already spoken to, had her first really major health crisis. She had a stroke. And fortunately, she's done actually quite well, considering. But I can tell you the first 6 or 8 weeks were not that enjoyable. I was spending most of my time in the hospital and working with the staff there. So that was just happened to be coincident when I took my first samples for the Pioneer 100 study, right? So it was like I had an imposed physiological and psychological stress, because I wasn't eating right, I wasn't exercising, I wasn't sleeping, I was under psychological stress. And so when I got the first data back, as is shown here, all of that looked very suggestive, right? So my serum insulin was, fasting insulin was whopping at 17.6. My hemoglobin A1C was not too elevated because it was probably, early on in this whole series, but my HOMA score, which is a measurement of insulin sensitivity, was elevated at 4.7. So I was in what one might call either pre-diabetes or early stage type 2 diabetes. My inflammatory markers were, in terms of HSCRP, was not high, but my IL-8 was very high. So I had a lot of kind of white cell stuff going on here, a lot of the body talking back, a lot of God of War, the color red, Mars, speaking to me, as it kind of reflected the conversations I was having with a few hospitalists in the hospital at the time. So I'm speaking to hospitalists that were managing my mother's care. It was very interesting, by the way, just as an aside, the nursing staff in the ICU were extraordinarily sensitive, and I had great conversations with them, and they understood this functional medicine concept just prima facie. The hospitalists, that was a whole different story. And I had some really interesting encounters with the hospitalists that ultimately led me to the chief of staff of the hospital, and we did make some changes. But but I think it was reflective in my red-colored IL-8 levels. So what about my blood element analysis? So this is, you know, your nutritional elements. And again, the toxic metals, I had a very high level of mercury. Now, where did that mercury come from? I don't have a lot of amalgams. But I'm a Seattle, Washington guy. I'm a huge lover of Japanese food. We have sushi 3 or 4 nights a week. And I was a big ahi guy. We also do a lot of fishing in Hawaii. So I eat a lot of ahi. So I cut my tuna down, and it made a very dramatic effect over 6 months on my red cell mercury level, reducing it. I talked about my vitamin D level. There it is, 38, even though I was taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. But remember, I found out from my genomics, I had the vitamin D receptor polymorphism poor binder. So I upped my vitamin D. My level came up into the about 57 over the course of the next 3 months. My glutathione was good. Coenzyme Q10 was good. And then once again, we say, well, if I'm eating all this fish, I must have pretty good omega-3s, and I did. My omega-3 levels in my analysis were about 7.5%. You want to get it between 7 and 11% is kind of a great range to have your total omega-3 levels. So it did kind of track with my eating habits. Then, of course, we did the adrenal stress test on all these individuals, and it was very interesting over the course of the months, because we did this 4 different times, to watch the trend as my mother's status recovered. I got back into sleep and my rhythm, and you could watch my phenotype then normalizing around my adrenal stress. And then what about things called rest and relaxation and vacation? This was a very interesting illustration. So, you know, your Fitbit obviously will give you a running record of your pulse rate. I've got the one that has the pulse monitor on it. So this is my resting heart rate for 30 days at a time that we decided to go for Hawaii for a week. Now you'll notice that my resting pulse started at 55, and over the course of the next week on vacation it went to 46. But then when I returned home, it went back up to 55. So this is another indicator, right? It's a learning curve. We're getting information and we're tying it together with our own uniqueness. What is stressful for one is not necessarily stressful for another. This is individualized. And we know that heartbeats that exceed 55 beats per minute, as you go up, your resting heartbeat goes up, there's an increasing increment of cardiovascular disease, right? So you'd like your heartbeat to be in the 50 to 55 range as a resting pulse. Well, what about my microbiome? Yes, we had 4 different opportunities to send off our stools with some reluctance to an anonymous testing lab. But it was very, very interesting because, you know, there's 2 features of your stool microbiome that we can tease out at present that are useful information. Number 1 is the diversity score of your species. If this is ecology that you've got down there in your lower 40, you'd like your ecology to be very like the rainforest with a lot of different plants that are maintaining stability. So you want a high diversity score. So this is my value, the green dot, in comparison to the other 103 people that were involved in the Pioneer 100. And you can see I had a pretty good total number of species. I was in the 80th percentile, and a pretty good diversity score. Now my diet tends to be more vegetable based. The only really animal protein I eat is fish with occasional chicken. So it's not totally unsurprising that I had a high diversity score, but I think it's interesting to note that when you laid this out onto the different families of bacteria, this is the Bacteroidetes, the Firmicutes, the proteobacteria, and the microbiota, which are different families that have different personalities. You'd like your green, which is the Firmicutes, and your red, which is the Bacteroides, to have a pretty good balance. Those that eat more vegetable-based diets generally have a preponderance of the red and a lower amount of the green. And that happens to be associated with lower incidences of certain types of digestive disorders and other metabolic disorders. So my number is right there in the middle. You can see that dark black line is where I ranked versus the other 102 people. Now you might say, how did that change over the course of the year? Because knowing this information, I became much more compliant thinking my microbiota. It's really interesting. So I said, oh, those probiotics in the morning, I can't miss them. Oh, those prebiotics, I need to eat more things with fructans and oligosaccharides in them. And I need to be more conscious about the, staying away from stuff just because it was convenient and I shouldn't really eat it. I just stay on my plan. And so using my microbiological diversity of my gut flora was really kind of a track back to compliance to the right diet. And by the way, you can change your microbiota in your stool within a period of days by changing your diet. It doesn't take months. So this is a fairly dynamic community relationship we have with our microbiota. So when I took all of this together, I say, where is this really going to be applied? And how does this really work in this complexity that we call our healthcare system? So I think you've already heard beautiful examples this morning as to where this is seeing its first emergence. First is this inborn errors of metabolism, genetic metabolism disorders, mitochondrial DNA mutations and mitochondrial transplants. You probably know that this is a new technology that's been approved in Britain, and it's now urgent to be improved, or at least it's imminent to be approved here in the United States, to actually replace mitochondria in fetuses or embryos that have altered mitochondrial genetic disorders that could end up to mitochondrial encephalopathies. So this is approved in Britain to do that kind of genetic transplant of mitochondria. Now, you might have some questions about that. I'm just saying this is what's going on based upon this information that's available from mitochondrial DNA analysis. Have you heard of CRISPR technology, CRISPR-Cas9 technology? This is just absolutely unbelievable. I was just at a meeting in Boston that I flew out from here talking about CRISPR-Cas9 technology. This is gene editing technology. I won't go into it in great detail. I'll just give you a quick insight that this technology, which was discovered in bacteria, is a technology that will allow what everyone has always wanted for having molecular scissors to go in and cut out one gene that's damaged and insert an appropriate gene. And the application of this over time, not today, will allow undoubtedly the ability to modulate genetic inborn errors of metabolism at the level of gene editing. Now, where that goes from there, this is the great world of the unknown, because now you might say, well, I'd like my boy to be 6'8", or I'd like my daughter to be able to jump high or do ballet, or so there's all sorts of ethical and interesting questions that come out of this, but that technology is a frame shift, translational disruptive innovation that is creating right now this next stage of how we see our genes and how we modify our genes. We then talk about targeted cancer therapy. And you heard a beautiful report, and you'll hear more over the course of the next couple of days about tumor genomics, the HER2 mutations, and the development of a drug like Herceptin that will work on a specific genetic mutant, these kinase mutational injuries that are associated with specific forms of cancer. And that we now don't get cancer, we get specific gene modulations that induce then a oncological event that we later call cancer. So the concept of cancer is really cancer is individualized to the patient. It's this N of one experience in real time. And so we're seeing all sorts of interesting ways of modulating these specific unique forms of cancer in individuals who have these mutational alterations. And then, of course, the big, great unknown, where the biggest impact of this technology is going to play a role, is that of personalized lifestyle healthcare, in which you start implementing not just the treatment of genetically damaged genes that are associated with the disease, but you start understanding the genome in such a way as you can implement a wellness program, which is the focus of the Pioneer 100 and other projects, to try to understand how we employ and leverage this information into the new wellness economy, the economy that's going to transform health and reduce this burden of disease so that the next drug is not just another symptom-suppressing medication that doesn't treat the cause, but rather manages the effect. So this personalized cancer care, genomics is the future of cancer care, is finally here. In fact, I heard a presentation yesterday by the head of oncology at Harvard Med School, who was saying that melanoma, which used to be considered really almost a diagnosis of death, will go to a zero level of death over the next few years with the technology that's now available. As long as we can get the right diagnosis early on, the drugs that are available will treat it like a chronic illness, like you would diabetes or heart disease. And that these breakthroughs in understanding how to leverage this genomic technology into targeted, personalized precision medicine is really starting to happen. And this example in Time magazine of these two women with the same diagnosis of glioblastoma, one in North Dakota, they didn't have access to the kind of drugs that were being tested versus the other woman who was in the metropolitan Boston area who had access to being a trial subject with some of these new medications, and their outcome based upon their ability to have access to drugs specific to their tumor is quite a dramatic story of where we're heading in this whole area. So we are in the functional medicine revolution. Omics and functional medicine as the system of application is exactly a marriage made in heaven. We are harnessing the omics revolution, and it requires a systems biology operating system. Functional medicine is the systems biology operating system for all the omics-related technologies. We know, as Dr. Hood and his colleagues, Nathan Price and others at the Institute for Systems Biology have told us, we need these 4 Ps to be fulfilled, but we need a system in which we can apply the 4 Ps. That is the functional medicine operating system, the way that we accumulate this information leading to actionable intervention with the patient. So on the horizon, I would say the following. Medicine based upon application of omics to a systems biology approach to disease prevention and treatment is at hand. It's not way off in the scientific future. It is at hand today. You're learning about that, you're leveraging, and you will become leaders. The information you will get here will, in fact, arm you with information, and I assure you that 95% of practicing healthcare providers don't understand today. You will be at the first at the gate to assist in this transformation. Number 2, quantification of wellness will become the new growth industry in healthcare. Why do you think you have Google and Apple and all these other players that are not healthcare companies involved? Because they know that's where the next big revolution in industry is going to occur. It will be like the birthing of the microcomputer industry in the 80s. Third, biometric data collected and analyzed will occur automatically through devices. I had the chance to wear the Google contact lens where I was measuring by my tears in real time my blood sugar. Yeah, a lens that actually has a piezoelectric device that picks up in your tears glucose that is correlated with an algorithm to your blood sugar in which you measure in real time. Now think of what happened if people had non-invasively had access to their blood sugar levels throughout the day. So every time they had eaten something or done something or had a stressful life, they could look down at their Apple Watch and they would say, oh my word, my blood sugar is now 160. What's going on here? Or 220. So I think information is power. And in fact, one of the members of my board is Dr. Dennis Ossuelo, who is a former chief of staff at Harvard Med School and at Mass General Hospital. And he was the principal person developing the app for the Apple Watch for this, this measurement of aspects related to blood sugar and aspects related to pulse and other fitness-related things that the Apple Watch is going to do. That Apple Watch data, he feels, will assemble over the course of the next 3 years more information about lifestyle and diabetes and blood sugar than all studies that have ever been done in the history of science. That's how this is happening in real time, consumer-driven information accrual that's taking the patient into the front and putting the provider as the service-related individual. Next, people become activated through information, as I said, and that will then allow them to understand how their lives affect their gene expression. Organ-specific immunological assessment will be done that allows for personalized therapy because we know the immune system and the nervous system are directly interrelated with our environment and how they function. And lastly, the pharmaceutical industry is going to be taking a major change. I would suggest that maybe the big 6 pharmaceutical companies are all running scared right now because the next companies that will grow up may not even be pharmaceutical companies that take over their space. Pharmaceutical industry develops drugs that modulate genetic expression and network biology rather than just agents that inhibit downstream pathological processes. That's the future of where we're heading. So with that in mind, can we make the future happen today? And I think the answer is yes. Your presence here is the start of that future. We need a well-informed cadre of informationally intact individuals who are mission-driven, passionate, and resist authority to create this paradigm shift. You are that group. We need to encourage people to start getting on board and measuring what's going on in their daily lives, because information is power. We need that information to get up into the cloud and be able to be looked at anonymously, patient anonymously, so that we can start developing patterns because in numbers become statistical observations that you can't find in small numbers. Informatics will become part of our daily living, this big data concept making, and you're going to hear more of this from Dr. Price. And social media will become the driver, just like patients like me, in which people are starting to communicate around the globe about affinity areas of concern. Health is the big issue, and wellness is the top of the drawer in the food chain of information right now. So let me close by saying that, as Lori indicated in her introduction, we're moving into an extraordinary period where all of this information needs to be digested, codified, distilled down, and distributed in ways that can be manageable. The IFM Omics series is a commitment to do that starting right now. This is the first day of starting this Omics imperative. It'll go on through December with things that we'll be seeing, articles and communication and news-to-use devices that will coming out on your smart devices. In the Personalized Lifestyle Medicine Institute, we have an online educational portal that has free of charge the downloads of all of our videos that we've done with these opinion leaders, the people whose names I've talked about that have had the privilege of interviewing at these different meetings. So you just need to go to our plmi.org website, and you can just sign in and get access to watch the videos of these thought leaders. And we have a 2015 consortium I'd invite all of you to that's going to have as our lead presenter, I'm very proud to say, Siddhartha Mukherjee, who was the Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Emperor of All Maladies, well-known oncologist who did what I think is a tour de force job in a book that's moving on every level, and also the PBS special of the same name that you might have seen. So he will be one of our lead-off speakers. We've got quite an assembly of what I consider thought leaders that I have brought from multiple different disciplines on this point of convergence where we are all participants and active players in this revolution that's occurring today. And the operating system for it happens to be functional medicine. Thank you very much.
So you're excited about genetics, you think this is the future of medicine, but what do you do when a patient actually walks into your office with their 23andMe? We spoke to Dr. E, who's been doing this for a couple of years, and he knows exactly what to do. So Dr. E, we've had a lot of talk here during the conference on, on genetic information. A lot of patients are doing 23andMe, and you've sort of become a specialist in helping patients work with that data. What's your recommendation to functional medicine doctors who have patients coming in with that sort of, with 23andMe data?
So my recommendation really is that they embrace it and that they take a organized fashion of looking at the data. So what I recommend doing and what I do in the office is I have the patients give us the raw data, because with 23andMe, because of the FDA's current law, they're not allowed to give you any type of clinical information. So I try to take that raw data and I'll run it through different programs that will give online that will give us clinical information. And then I break the visit, or I break the analysis into different appointments, and one appointment will talk about methylation, the next appointment will talk about ApoE status. So I kind of break it down into different appointments and really make sure that the patient knows that we're going to take this one step at a time. Don't look at everything, because otherwise you'll get overwhelmed. Even when you speak to a group of physicians, when I'm trying to explain the methyl pathways, I'm visualizing the pathways in my head. So I need to sit down and I need to show the patient the chart, and I show them the transfer of methyl groups and where they can have a problem and what that problem would lead to. And let me give you a quick example. Yeah. So if they have the MTHFR gene mutation, what's happening is that they can't convert folate to methylfolate, which will, when you show them on the chart that here's your problem, and look, if this happens, you'll get a backup of homocysteine, and homocysteine is toxic. And when this happens, you can't make your serotonin and dopamine, your happy hormones, and I show it to them, it just makes perfect sense to them. I like taking their genetic information, I like taking their raw data, and I like being the one really steering the ship. So I will take it and I will put it through whatever program I need to so that we can really take the stress off the patient, tell them, look, everybody has all kinds of reds, blues, and greens, or reds, yellows, and greens. And if you're going to sit and go over every one of your genes, you're just going to go crazy. Just let me be in charge of that, and I will take the information and look at what's relevant. And I think what that does is it alleviates them. They realize that they're not alone, that they have a partner that is studying and researches this information and really wants to help them, and they don't feel a need to figure it out on their own. They feel like they realize that, wow, I can depend on my provider. Let me relax. Let me not stress out about it. Because the worst thing that can happen is they stress out about the results, and that causes their heart disease and their Alzheimer's and whatnot. So it could actually be detrimental if we don't take an active role here.
How important do you feel like this kind of sort of trifecta of doctor, patient, and genetic information is going to be for the future of medicine?
I think it's very important. I think that you're going to have the doctors involved. And what I'm seeing over and over is doctors don't want to, because it seems so overwhelming to them, they're just leaving patients on their own, and they're not wanting to get involved at all. Yeah. And I find by doing that, you're really not doing justice for patients. You're going to cause lots of stress, and they're going to feel like they have nowhere to turn to. And sometimes they'll go to certain websites that will recommend some wacky things that are really not healthy for them. Before I started doing functional medicine, when I started my own practice, and I started slowly going over patients' medication and supplements and whatnot, they were kind of surprised. A lot of patients were surprised that I'd ask them to see their supplements. Yeah. Because most doctors don't even want to know about it, or they say there's nothing to it. Yeah. And what I found is that by me actually sitting and going over the supplements and discussing why they're on it, they were willing to confide more in me. Yep. And they would listen to me when I said, hey, I don't think you need this supplement, but this supplement makes sense. So the same thing with the genetic testing. They're not going to expect you to know everything in the 23andMe. Yeah. Nobody does. There's nobody on the planet that knows what to do with all the information. But if they see that you're at least engaging and you're trying to help guide them in their own health, I mean, it's powerful.
From a practice management point of view, is there any ways that you've worked to try and sort of do this education sort of in a slightly bigger scale than one-on-one?
Right. Well, what I'm developing now is look at the way that I do the one-on-one, but turn it into lectures where we do group visits. The patients will get their 23andMe results, they'll have them there, and I'll just go over one piece at a time.
Awesome.
So I think that, yes, the one-on-one is important, but group visits are huge. They can really take it to the next level, and they can give us, it's the doctor's time better spent. Like, I can sit and go over a diet with patients, and that's why I hire people to go over a diet with patients. Yep. But when I give a lecture and I can spend 1 or 2 hours with 50 patients or 30 patients, it's better use of my time. And that way they can answer, they can interact with each other, and they can ask appropriate questions. And I really think that's where we need to go. My recommendation is, you got to come up with a template. You got to come up with a systematic way of looking at the genetic information, and then just follow that. And every provider will have to decide what they think is more relevant. I can tell you what I think is more relevant, but it's pretty open. I've said this over and over, and I actually am going to be mentioning this in my lecture tomorrow, that what is the difference between a good doctor and a great doctor? Well, a good doctor does what everybody else does. It's really an average doctor. What is standard of care? Standard of care means that they're doing what every other doctor is going to do. The thing is, the great doctor is willing to think outside of the box. For us to think outside of the box, we really need to look at the future of where our field is going. And definitely, genetics and epigenetics is the future.
It has been such a pleasure, if not a little bit overwhelming, to meet so many practitioners who have told us how much they love watching the Functional Forum. And it's been a little surprising, but what has been even more surprising is hearing from practitioners who love listening to our Evolution of Medicine podcast. And for those of you who have never watched the podcast, I just wanted to give you an idea of a couple of things that we've done recently that I think you might be really interested in. Back in May, we did a 4-part series called The Future of Patient Compliance, where myself and my partner Gabe Hoffman interviewed 4 CEOs of 4 different technologies that can play a big difference when we bring doctors and coaching and technology together. That's the future of patient compliance, and it's not compliance at all. It's empowerment, and technology and coaching skills are really allowing that to happen. And another podcast series that we're embarking on right now is called the Micro Practice Revolution. You know, in between your regular medical practice and starting an integrative practice is a micro practice, a low overhead practice. Last week we heard from Dr. Jeffrey Glad, who has built an integrated micro practice in rural Indiana. And this week on the podcast, if I recommend no other podcast, we're going to hear from a business owner and a doctor, a functional doctor in Lubbock, Texas, where they have a functional practice in a factory, and in the first year they reduced prescription drug usage by 62%. This is corporate wellness. This is functional medicine meeting corporate wellness. It's one of the best podcasts that I've ever recorded, and it comes out this Thursday. So if you listen to podcasts regularly, or if you've never listened to our podcast, go to the website. You can check it out on iTunes or Stitcher. Check out the Evolution of Medicine podcast. Give us a 5-star review, and you can keep up to date with all of our content by liking our Facebook page at the Functional Forum.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ben Lynch, and I'm the director of Seeking Health Educational Institute, seekinghealth.org. And my 1-minute tip for the functional medicine community is stress and glutathione. We all know that stress is bad news, but the key thing that you need to understand is when we're stressed, we make the neurotransmitters of norepi, epinephrine, and these require breakdown. And there's an enzyme that is there, the MAO, the monoamine oxidase enzyme, which is there to break it down. And as we increase our stress, the demand for this enzyme goes up, and this demand uses up vitamin B2. But in order for vitamin B2 to be utilized properly, it has to be restored back. And that requires glutathione. And that requires glutathione because when you break down your stress neurotransmitters, you're releasing a bunch of hydrogen peroxide. Have you ever wondered why you see people who are under tremendous amounts of stress and they get gray hair almost instantly? Hydrogen peroxide. There's your tip.
I think we really need to reframe the way we treat patients and look at their health care, focusing more on educating them to understand what's going on in their bodies so that they can take more care of themselves. Over 60% of what we see in terms of resolution of health issues comes back into the hands of the patient, and they really do need to understand why we're recommending what we're recommending, how to take control of their everyday life to manage their illness. So that's our job as practitioners, to really function as educators or create partnerships that can educate the patient to move towards resolution of their health.
And now I have with me Dr. Steve Masley. He is author of the 30-Day Heart Tune-Up and also the curator of an upcoming Healthy Heart Summit, which starts next Monday. Doc, how inspiring was that from Dr. Bland?
That was an awesome talk. It was inspiring and helps us focus on how our genetics really impacts our health in so many important ways.
You know, last year we had you on as the evolution of cardiology, and you're not a cardiologist. It seems like, you know, what we were saying here today is that the evolution of cardiology is going to be patient-centric. I'm so excited that you're making patient-centric information to get this word out.
Right, so how can we really prevent this? How can we give people the tools and information to transform healthcare so we don't need cardiology anymore? I mean, we can prevent 90% of heart disease. So it's just taking those steps to figure out what we can do to personalize our healthcare choices to really make it better for all of us.
Awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to the summit. I was glad to be a participant on it and talk about, you know, some of the things that are important to me with community. We've been taking 1-minute tips from doctors all weekend to talk to the practitioner community about, you know, tips that you would offer to providers to help them to practice better. What's your tip?
Well, my tip for community would be really include the people you love with what you're going to do. Involve them in your choice. Ask them to help you. Give them your goals, what you want to change, and then ask you to support them in doing that. Too often we'll say to like a spouse or partner, you can't have this anymore. But you know, that's not a very effective way to communicate. And what we want is that support. So we want our friends and family to support us in making choices. And health providers, that's what they need to do. We need to get patients to work with their loved ones to make a change, especially to have food and activity. It's so much more powerful. And I like when we did group visits before, I always encourage them to bring the most important person in your life here. Involve them. If we're talking about changing how you eat, how you exercise, how you manage stress, we want to involve that person's community in the whole process to get that support up front.
Absolutely, such a key point. And so, you know, I'd recommend to any doctors that are watching, if you have patients that have heart issues, give them an opportunity to get empowered for free. The Healthy Heart Summit, it starts next Monday, July 13th, and you can recommend it to your patients, and you can go to healthyheartsummit.com and check it out. Dr. Masley, I wish you even more success. I know you got another book coming out next year. What is it?
Smart Fat.
Okay.
Smart Fat to lose weight and enhance your health. It's really going to be an awesome new concept and idea for people.
That's great. Well, coming from a doctor and a chef and someone who's done group visits for a long time, couldn't have come from a better guy. Thanks so much, Dr. Masley. Good luck with the next book and the summit, and I'll be on there, and I hope you will be too.
Your patients love what you do, and to them, it all appears so easy. You are their medical detective. They trust you to find the underlying cause of disease and help restore them back to health. At Living Matrix, we understand why delivering truly individualized care is your passion. But we also know that most days are far from easy for you. Some days, it feels like you are drowning in paperwork and inefficiency. Patient appointments have to be rescheduled due to missing intake forms. Filling in so much paperwork for each patient seems to take forever, and you find yourself wondering if it's worth all of the extra time. At Living Matrix, we understand you need to efficiently run your functional medicine practice. So, in collaboration with IFM, we have developed Living Matrix just for you. It's a cloud-based software solution that streamlines and digitizes these paper processes. We will help you focus on practicing functional medicine rather than on shuffling and managing paper. Using the Living Matrix application, you can electronically invite patients to fill in their forms online. No more trying to locate missing forms and deciphering messy handwriting. Remind patients with just a push of a button and track their progress easily. It's time to say goodbye to appointment cancellations due to missing forms. Once the patient submits their completed forms, Living Matrix takes the patient data and pre-populates the functional medicine timeline and matrix for you. No more being a scribe. Just update and edit the information as needed, and spend your time instead on recognizing the patterns and implications revealed by these powerful tools. With the Living Matrix patient profile, we make it really easy to track patient progress over time and also help you easily create a plan for your patients to follow. Register your practice today so you can focus more time on what you do best, restoring your patients back to health.
Hi and welcome back. As well as the great speakers, we've been checking out what's going on in the practice implementation showroom and seeing what's going on with the technologies, particularly that we think are going to change the game in functional medicine. And one of the big things we need to do better is track outcomes. And one of the booths that has the ability to do that is an IFM collaboration called Living Matrix. Their booth has been slammed this whole weekend with people wanting to check it out. And I've got the founder, Dr. Priya, and she's here. Doc, what's the feedback been like from the group?
Well, the feedback has been tremendous. People are extremely excited about the Living Matrix application. As you know, in functional medicine, the use of the IFM forms, timeline, and matrix are extremely critical to doing the detective work to help resolve people's health issues and get them back restored to health.
Yeah.
And so what we have done is take the paper versions of these forms and automate them, and we've put them online, and we're taking the patient intake data and making it work for the practitioner.
That's so awesome.
And so it saves them an incredible amount of time much less scribing,
Yeah.
much more editing, and they're able to very quickly get down into the problem solving rather than being a scribe.
Awesome. Give everyone at home an idea of what the world is going to look like when you have hundreds of functional practices all using this technology at once in terms of our ability to track outcomes at scale.
Well, the great thing about this is that as we're collecting the data, we're going to be able to much more easily, compared to paper records, be able to do comparisons between patients and across practices.
Awesome. So exciting. Dr. Robin Berzin, when she spoke at our functional forum, said the two biggest issues that were facing functional medicine was affordability and ability to track outcomes. And I'm really excited to share with you. And later this month, we're going to be bringing you a specific interview that I did with Priya to show you some of the technology. It launches this month. It's a game changer for the industry. And we're really excited to be working with you. Thanks
Great.
so much.
Thank you so much,
I'll let you
James.
get back to the booth because I know there's a lot of people trying to sign up. There's like a line of people wanting to sign up. But you'll hear about it here first at the Functional Forum. So we're very excited to be part of this IFM collaboration. And the reason why the IFM wanted to get involved with the Functional Forum is because of our meetup groups. And if you're watching this show today by yourself, what we are trying to do here at the Functional Forum is to develop communities of functional and integrated providers all over the world. We have meetup groups all over America, Canada, and all over the world meeting together, groups of physicians getting together, watching the high quality content from functional medicine leaders and discussing it in their local communities. Community is the guru of the future, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, and our goal is to engage practitioners into a community. And one of the reasons why we do this, and we've heard from practitioners in New York, is practitioners who do functional medicine seem isolated in their communities, and it doesn't give them the confidence to think that this is actually something that's happening and to start acting not like we're losing, but like we're winning. This is the future of chronic disease management, and working together in a community will allow you, one, to meet with a group of your peers, get referrals, but two, once you're coordinated and you have that group, we can do some really special things. And later on this year, we're going to be coordinating a nationwide film festival where each film is organized, and each local theater is organized by a group of practitioners. And the people that will benefit most from the organization is you, because we're going to send a lot of educated patients your way. So if you're watching this, find some other providers, invite them. It's the first Monday of every month. You know where to be. Tune into the Functional Forum.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kara Fitzgerald. I am faculty at the Institute for Functional Medicine on the Immune module. I have a private practice in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. You can reach me at www.drkarafitzgerald.com. My 1-minute tip. Think about divalent metal transport protein 1. It's a pretty interesting player with regard to moving metals into the body, both in the GI tract as well as at the blood-brain barrier. In fact, I was just reading today about DMT being located in the substantia nigra. So when we're deficient in minerals, in particular iron, toxic metals hitch a ride via DMT1 through the GI, but also across the blood-brain barrier. So this means lead, mercury, etc. So one of the most fundamental things we can do for our patients is make sure they're replete in their essential minerals. Iron, obviously, but we're looking at magnesium, we're looking at zinc, a number of essential minerals hitch a ride in via DMT1. And if we're deficient, as many of our patients are, toxic metals are going to hitch a ride in via that carrier protein.
I would love to see more healthcare practitioners assess general musculoskeletal findings that can be done through simple palpatory evaluation, like the tone of skeletal muscle, primarily spinal, paraspinal musculature, and look at the mobility of spinal joints. Turns out that both of those are really clear, quite immediate reflections of systemic physiology and a great indicator of gastrointestinal health. So we can use those to track whether or not the things that the patients are doing or that we are recommending as treatments are actually having an effect.
We are back here at the IFM Practice Implementation Showroom. If you're a fan of the Functional Forum, you know that we only endorse the best technologies that can help you run a successful micro practice. And it's super cool that two of our favorites are here. We've got MDHQ, Ben Dappen is helping someone out right now get set up, and HealthWave right next door. And the beauty of having these two companies right next door to each other at IFM, they're talking, they're integrating. This is the future of functional medicine. Check out the links below to find out more about these two companies to help you build a low overhead integrative micro practice. Hello and welcome back. We are here with Linus Pauling Award winner, Dr. Bob Roundtree. That's the first time probably someone said it out loud.
Yes, the first time out loud. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, so Doc, I just want to, people who have watched us for a long time know that it was your talk at ACAM on the microbiome that really was a starting point for this whole journey. So I really appreciate your influence on the Functional Forum and everything that I've done.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to share today that last year we did a Functional Forum at the Detox module, and it seems like maybe it got IFM interested in streaming.
Yes.
And there's going to be some opportunity this Saturday to hear Dr. Roundtree speak at the module from Chicago. So
That's
maybe
right.
you can just share with the folks at home what they can expect to get on that module.
Well, what I'm going to go into for that particular streaming lecture is this whole notion of low-dose toxins and how ubiquitous they are in the environment, and how every one of us has a certain degree of susceptibility depending on our genetics, etc.
Okay. And you know, we just had a 45-minute segment from Jeff Bland on this show. It's exciting to see, you know, all of these things coming together after, you know, years of going to these conferences. How excited are you to see, you know, low-dose toxicity or transgenerational epigenetics being taken seriously by modern science now?
Well, I think it's phenomenal, and I have to say it's being taken seriously in some quarters, but not in all quarters. So it's important for us to continue to get the word out, and to say there is solid science behind this. But right now what we're seeing is a big fight between the endocrinologists who take this very seriously and some of the toxicologists who, shall we say, receive funding from industry that are not so excited about the information that's coming out. The facts are clear, and that's what I'm going to go into in my lecture. The facts are very clear. We know what the impact is. We know these things can be endocrine disruptors. And the endocrinologists have really taken up that banner, and they're running with that banner. So there's almost like a publication war that's going on, and that's partly what I'm going to address.
That's exciting, and going to Chicago, which is possibly the Roundup capital of America.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know if you've ever seen the map, but there's like a big brown stain over the Midwest.
Right in the Midwest.
Right, well, they're taking it to you. Linus Pauling winner, Dr. Bob Roundtree. It's great to have you here, and good luck this Saturday.
Thank you very much.
We'll have the details for the link below. Thanks so much for watching. This has been the Functional Forum from Austin, Texas. I hope you've enjoyed it. We've had a great time here in Austin, and next month we will be bringing you another show from IFM, including Dr. Michael Ash. We'll have an update from the Cleveland Clinic from Dr. Pat Hanaway, Dr. Mark Hyman. You'll hear from rising stars in the field like Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, Dr. Shilpa Saxena. We've got Dr. Tom O'Brien. We've got a great show for you next month. Get a group of practitioners together and start watching the show. That's our goal here. Our goal at the Evolution of Medicine is 100,000 integrative micro practices to replace primary care. If you think you could be one of those practices, we'd love to hear from you and help to give any support that we can in helping you to build that successful practice. If you want to schedule a time with one of our Evolution of Medicine concierges, you can go to evomed.com. That's evomed.com, and you'll find a place to book in with one of our concierges. Until next month, we'll see you next time.
Joy. Joy in all areas, not just your own joy. You know, finding joy in your practice is imperative, but finding ways for your patients to find joy. And this isn't fluffy. There's really good science on community and relationships and joy. In fact, there are many studies that suggest that these relationships and this community and this joy is more powerful than fixing their cholesterol or lowering their C-reactive protein or any of these things. So that's my tip. Find ways to find joy.